Before we get started, I have a quick favor. I've been self-funding the Finding Genius podcast for 5 years now. I've done over 3,000 episodes. And as you can see on YouTube, we're up over 1 million views on the channel, which is fantastic. The next thing I really want to push on is to get up to 10,000 subscribers, because once we do, we'll be able to put a donate button, and we'll be able to solicit donations to help keep the podcast running and to also get the Finding Genius Foundation moving along. We have a big project studying anxiety, depression, and PTSD, and working on a product to help people overcome these problems, because I've seen them explode recently after the last 2 years of the whole virus situation. So if you would, please subscribe to the podcast. That would help us tremendously. Give us a thumbs up and check in the description for Buy Me a Coffee. It's about $5. If you could buy me a coffee, I'd really appreciate it. It would help keep the channel going, and I love coffee. Thank you.
Forget frequently asked questions,
common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius Podcast, now part of the Finding Genius Foundation. My guest is Dr. Gregory Kelly. He's a director of product development at the Neurohacker Collective. He's also a naturopathic physician and an author of a book called Shapeshift. So we're going to talk about his work with Neurohacker podcast, a substance called NAD+, and a lot of interesting subjects. So welcome, Greg. Thanks for coming.
Oh, thanks for having me today. Looking forward to talking with you and sharing things with your audience.
Yeah, tell me a bit about your background. How did you get into, the whole self-hacking arena, and how did you end up working with Neurohacker?
Yeah, so super brief story. I started out as an officer in the Navy, mid-'80s, and I was the weird officer on the ship back then that was, exercise, tried to eat meticulously and be healthy despite what wasn't the best environment at the time. And when I got out, at the time, there was no such thing, obviously, as biohacking. Came about much later. But really, my passion was to be able to travel and stay healthy for as many years as possible. And I realized after the Navy that to do that, I had to be able to take better care of myself outside of the medical system and just, be able to stay healthy as long as possible to enjoy my life, and eventually became a naturopathic doctor. And starting about 5 years ago, crossed paths with Neurohacker Collective, and it was a great fit. At the time, their focus was on the brain exclusively at that point, and that had been one of my primary areas of interest. So it was just a seamless fit. And then since then, we've done a lot more in what I think of the healthy aging space, but we're still deep into doing things to help the brain perform better.
A quick question. What's involved in becoming a naturopathic doctor versus a medical doctor?
So it's completely different schools and different licensing exams. So what would be the case? I don't know the current status, but when I went to naturopathic school in 93, there was only 7 states that we could practice in with a medical license, and we would have our own medical board, just like chiropractors would be a separate profession. And in terms of education, we would still need a pre-med background from undergrad, and then the first 2 years would be really similar. We do anatomy, biology, biochemistry, neuroanatomy, all of those. But when it gets to then, interventions, our toolkit would just be vastly different. We focus much more on diet, lifestyle, herbs, homeopathy. Acupuncture was, something I learned when I was going through. So, then when we get out, we kind of report to different medical boards, if that makes sense. So,
it makes sense.
In a sense, like you're defined by your scope of practice, and it's the medical board in that state that dictates that. So, even naturopaths in some states, I can do acupuncture, some I wouldn't be able to. So,
and what's the current premise of the Neurohacker Collective? Like what is the goal of the organization, and what do you do there?
Yeah, so the Neurohacker Collective was really founded with the idea if we can help people's brains perform better, it will really upgrade all of society. Because, our belief is, and I think this plays out definitely in things I've seen, when our brain's working better, we're able to have more empathy, we can control our emotions better, we don't, get into as many arguments, we have more capacity of what's called executive function, right? To basically to do the things that require willpower, and be able to win in life. So that was where we started. And, fundamentally, we're a company that deeply cares about helping people perform better. across the board. And my role is twofold. I help create supplement products, and then I do a lot of educational work. We have a really big imprint, on Instagram compared to any other social media. So I provide a lot of the content for that, a lot of the, the blog content that we use to educate people. Whether anyone ever buys a supplement or not, we want people to learn more about how to be better versions of themselves.
So do you make nootropics, or what kind of supplements have you had your hand in making?
Yeah, so our original product, something called Qualia Mind, is a nootropic, and that's still, one of our 2 best-selling products. But I have my hand in all of the products that Neurohacker Collective has made, and our brand is Qualia. So that's the brand you'd see out in public whenever you see that. That's one of our products. And other than the brain, the main area I think that we've spent a lot of time would be the healthy aging space, longevity, so to speak.
Okay. I saw in your bio you talked about a substance called NAD+. I've had various infusions where you get vitamins and stuff like that, and I've also had NAD+ in it, and I think that's what I had. And I felt like it was just, I slept a little bit better. I felt a little bit more relaxed, just more alert, for about 3 days after. So it seemed to have a positive effect, but I wanted to ask you about it.
Yeah, so NAD usually wouldn't be in a supplement. So NAD is a pretty big molecule, but we make NAD from things that would be in dietary supplements, things that nicotinamide riboside, sometimes it's abbreviated NR, another substance called NMN, and then we can also make it from some of the older vitamin B3 forms. And each form's a little bit different in terms of where it acts the best and how it's needed the most. But NAD is kind of a hub molecule. We need it to make energy in our cells. So without enough of it, that energy is a common thing that people comment when they start to do strategies to boost NAD. We also need it to protect cells. Just like us, can be under a lot of stress. And NAD is one of the things that they need more of when they're metabolically stressed. And then NAD, and this was, wasn't known when I went through biochemistry in the early 90s, but now it's known it also plays roles in things like DNA repair and in all kinds of other pathways within cells that regulate, cells' lifespan fundamentally.
So instead of, treating people for sickness, now you're helping, produce supplements and all that to keep people well. I guess it's a very different take. What is that transition like from being a physician and, again, helping for people that are quote unquote ill versus more of a preventative type strategy that you take now, it seems like?
Yeah, so I think naturopathic medicine embedded in that is much more focused on creating wellness. And I generally, in my mind, thought of there's fundamentally almost 2 different games that we can play, right? We can play one where we're already, have some defined illness and we're trying to manage the problem, or we can play a completely different game that would be creating health in advance so that we're more resilient and don't get sick to the things that would normally knock us off kilter. And to me, that second game has always been far more interesting, right? So I've helped many people in the first category, but even when I was in practice, there was a subset of people that came that were already healthy and wanted to know more about, okay, what do I do to take my health to the next level, or to make sure the same issues that, my parents or grandparents had, I don't have or don't have as early in life. And so I think, supplements, or the right supplement strategy combined with, good diet and lifestyle things can really be almost what I think of as an investment in the future. So almost like a financial investment, right? We want to have a diversified portfolio and do things that, we anticipate will pay dividends over the long term. And I think that game of building health is that type of thing. That my goal for myself and people I work with is to create a portfolio of good investments that are going to pay dividends down the road.
What do you think about, I've heard some people say over the years, there's no point taking fancy vitamins, you just pee them out. Have you heard that? And what do you say to that?
Yeah. I've heard it all going back even before I went to naturopathic school in 93. So I think it's misinformed. I think, sometimes things get overhyped, which is, that doesn't do anyone any service. But I think supplements are potentially one of the best investments we can make. But it depends on the supplement, right? There's lots of different ones out there. Some are better, some are worse. And in my mind, I know when I'm working on any project, but say we're going to create a product to boost NAD, right? One of the ones we have, Qualia NAD+, then I always start back and I'm like, okay, what's this supposed to do? What does it work look like? And, from that perspective, I think, our brand is a little bit different than most, right? So we only care about having products if we can put something together, do a study on it, and the people that took it really had a real world benefit where there was some aspect of their life that, so to speak, the problem we were after really improves. And so I think supplements can be a great boon for that, especially in a world currently where, soils aren't as rich in nutrients. Water used to have all kinds of minerals, not so much anymore. We're surrounded by lots of environmental toxins, microplastics in our food, and water has been in the news a lot lately. So we're just, stressed in ways that, even my grandparents would not have been. And so I don't think we can get everything we need from a good diet anymore.
How can someone tell when they're eating something if it's good for them or not? Beyond the obvious. How do you know?
I mean, the way that naturopaths and functional medicine MDs would typically do it is they would do elimination diets that have people, really go down to just a few foods that are generally well tolerated in everyone, and then reintroduce one food at a time and see if that provokes feeling something really, not great. But otherwise, it's hard to tell. Like there's, so many things that can be happening that are below the level of awareness, or we just take for granted. I like what classic thing is, if you were to sleep deprive people, for say a week, the first couple nights, or days, they'll notice like, oh, I feel really sleepy. But by the end of the week, they've kind of started already to adjust to it. They're more used to not feeling great, and that becomes the new normal. And that's why it makes it hard with food in our diets to tell, unless we're doing things intentionally to try to provoke, something.
Before we continue, I've been personally funding the Finding Genius podcast for 4.5 years now, which has led to 2,700 plus interviews of clinicians, researchers, scientists, CEOs, and other amazing people who are working to advance science and improve our lives and our world. Even though this podcast gets 100,000 plus downloads a month, we need your help to reach hundreds of thousands more worldwide. Please visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click on Support Us. We have 3 levels of membership from $10 to $49 a month, including perks such as the ability to see ahead in our interview calendar and ask questions of upcoming guests, transcripts of podcasts you're interested in, the ability to request specific topics or guests, and more. Visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click Support Us today. Now, back to the show.
You're right. For a while, I was on the ketogenic diet for maybe 6 months, and I felt so good a lot of days. I didn't know what to do with myself. Like I'd have so much excess energy. I was like freaking out. I didn't realize you could feel so good, which was really cool.
Yeah. So, and that would be my goal when people take our Qualia products, right? So the Qualia NAD, since we started talking about NAD, the most common thing that we get as feedback is people feel more energy. And the second most thing is kind of a sense of recovery, right? That they're not as fatigued after doing things, or if they didn't get a great night's sleep, or if they exercise more. And those to me are just calling cards that we just have more juice in the tank. And I think all of us want more juice in the tank, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, now that we're on that vein, what other supplements have you seen had an outsized effect on people, positive one?
Well, our original product, Qualia Mind, the one that's the nootropic for brain, that one just is an excellent product for people that want to, be more motivated, feel more energy, more productivity, more focus. So, that's a great one. We have another one that would be more in the sleep category called Qualia Night. And, so that one, most people that take that and benefit from it notice dramatic improvements in the quality of their sleep.
Oh, really? Wow. What substances are in the sleep supplement, for instance, that contribute to better sleep?
We make fairly complex recipes of things, but it's a combination of mushrooms, reishi specifically, herbs, vitamins, some amino acids. So it's really a blend that, the goal is to take it sometime in your early evening to get more relaxed, and then that naturally leads into easier and better sleep.
Okay, makes sense. So in addition to supplements, what are some of the other things that you're working on through Neurohacker, or maybe on your own?
Mostly, like my time's pretty filled up with Neurohacker. So, like I said at the beginning, my job's really to be the education and, to help design new products and ultimately, research what's going to go into them, and then research the products after they're launched to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do.
I've heard people say, when you're younger, if you work out and you eat well, great. But as you get older, the workout is not nearly as important as the eating. Have you seen that? Is there a scale that you have in mind? Does that apply? The older you get, the more your diet's important and the less, let's say, physical activity is, or it's not necessarily true?
No, I would say that's not true. If anything, it would maybe be slightly go in the other direction. As we get older, exercise is just crucial. And we want to, do things to maintain muscle mass, to maintain flexibility and balance, aerobic capacity. Those things are all crazily linked to both longevity, but also being able to stay healthy, right? Like a lot of, probably on average, they have something called life expectancy after 60. So, there's average life expectancy, which takes into account everyone, people that died, in childhood, teenage years, early in life. But life expectancy after 60 means, all right, how long would we expect someone to live once they've hit their 60th birthday? And on average in North America, it's about 23 and a half years, but at least 7 on average of those years is spent in really ill health, right? Like disability, assisted living, things like that. And, exercise would be one of the core strategies that helps us, not have as much of that time in ill health.
No, that's good to hear. I guess it sounds like an excuse, oh, you're older, I'm tired, I don't want to work out, but if I eat better, I'll be fine. I guess maybe that's what people are thinking in their minds, and that's why they don't realize both are so important.
Yeah, it's why I brought up that idea of like a portfolio, an investment, right? Like we want to make, it would be the same. Like there's lots of things we could put our money in, right? Stocks, gold, crypto. But the best odds of retiring in good shape is when we have a more diversified, well-thought-out portfolio financially. And it's, I think, the same when it comes to diet, lifestyle, and supplements, right? We want to cover all our bases.
So, I don't know, is there a particular, I guess Neurohacker doesn't necessarily do counseling, but are your supplements also geared for different age ranges or circumstances? Like, and, are you crossing over into advising people medically if you say too much? Like what can you say and what can't you say about the supplementation, and when should it be used and how?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So there's regulatory agencies. The FDA has their regulations. The FTC, which is the Federal Trade Commission, has theirs. And the key thing with any dietary supplement is the FDA's, black letter law, so to speak, is that supplements can't be used or advertised to treat or prevent diseases. Right, so they have to be more positioned in the frame of things that they're doing in our body to help our body perform better. And so, that's our goal with the quality supplements. They're very much geared towards, okay, what's an area that we can do to really, improve a positive function that someone would care about. Going back to Qualia NAD as an example, right? You mentioned, you took an NAD booster at one point, felt a, bit more energy, a bit better sleep. Right? Those are positive areas that, I think are what I care most about and what supplements can compliantly talk about in terms of government regulations.
So when people will request supplements from Neurohacker, do they go through a quiz or anything to, they ask them their age and their condition and, any ailments they have, like where they're just able to order, how would people know what to order and what situations without guidance?
Yeah, so I would say we don't have any things like that, right? So we make supplements. If there's, most of our things we would say, don't take if pregnant, as an example, right? Because, that's a relatively small subset of things that are prudent to take when a woman would be pregnant. But, things like, as an example, Qualia NAD, we make for all adults fundamentally, but really the sweet spot of when NAD levels are starting to decline and it becomes a product that's more beneficial or advantageous would be starting, say 30 to 40. In that range, our NAD levels are usually already lower than they were when we were 20, and they get progressively less with each decade. So that product, the importance and the customer kind of breakdown of who takes it just ramps up. We have customers that start that product in the early 30s, and then, we have more customers that are in their 40s and 50s take it because their NAD levels are already, typically well below the optimal amounts that they would have had when they were younger. And the same would play out for different products.
So what would be a good thing to do? Like, should people, let's say, get a whole bunch of biomarkers looked at every 6 months and chart them and see where, where they're trending, if anywhere, or if they're low or high within a certain range for, different biomarkers? Like, what would be a good general recommendation to help people?
Yeah. So, that's one way to go, right? That, like, right now, a lot of people have wearable tech, right? Like an iWatch or an Oura Ring or, a Garmin watch or Fitbit, you name it. Right. So those are great to track, heart rate variability often, obviously all the sleep types of things. So that, that gives some really useful big picture. But like let's going back to Qualia NAD and the NAD levels. So it's hard to get NAD levels tested and it's expensive. So, I've done my own multiple times and it's, certainly a doable thing. But mine and everyone else I've done does exactly what you'd expect. They're lower the older people get. So rather than, spending a lot of money on testing that's going to just fundamentally confirm something that is likely true, it's often better to just run the self-experiment and do the thing that you think is going to improve that. And then, see if it does subjectively, right? If, NAD as an example, did your energy go up? Are you sleeping better? Are you able to exercise more or recover faster, right? Rather than, investing a couple $100s in a test that probably isn't going to give you any more information then we would already know that, oh, you're 40, your levels are probably suboptimal already. And then what we do is we always run studies ourselves. So we've had people take Qualia NAD before and after, and what we see is NAD levels increase by on average about 75% over a month. So we know the product does what it's supposed to do in terms of restoring that to its more optimal levels.
So, if you're able to comment on it, what's next for Neurohacker? Like, what direction are you all headed in?
We always have a few new product concepts that we're working on. And what we do is we spend a lot of time researching an area. So joint health is one I spent a lot of time on the latter half of 2023. And sometime soon, we're going to be putting the product that, at least been put together as a beta product into a study to see if it really makes a big difference in the performance, the ability to exercise and recover quickly. Because one of the things that's very common, hitting people by their 40s and sometimes even earlier is that our joints are just, from exercise, they get a bit more inflamed easier from doing, like weightlifting or running or things like that. So the goal of the product is just to help people recover faster so that they can do that really wise investment in exercise. So that's really the next big project. And if the study turns out well, then eventually we'll move that forward as a product that we, have available on our website.
Okay. And then also on the show notes about a podcast, if you wanted something about that, you can direct listeners to listen as well.
Yeah, so neurohacker.com, we've had our podcast called Collective Insights. I've heard that the branding of it may change sometime in August, but Collective Insights is how it's always gone by. And it's a really health-focused podcast. I co-host it. Another doctor, a medical doctor, is the other co-host. So I do some shows, he hosts the other shows. My shows tend to always be focused on authors of cool books. Recently, I've interviewed a few authors that have just done a lot of research on the brain, attention, mind-body type things. So, if listeners are interested, you can find a link to that on the neurohacker.com website. But you can also just find it looking for Collective Insights in any of the places you listen to podcasts.
Okay, well, very good. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And I appreciate it. And for people to check out Neurohacker Collective, where can they go?
Yeah, so our website is neurohacker.com, and Instagram is really our main social channel, and just look for Neurohacker on Instagram. We do a lot of education on that. So, if you like learning about the brain, learning about health, longevity, please follow us on Instagram.
Okay, very good. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.